Welcome to the Simply Wild podcast. I'm your host, Sadie Jane, and we are finding the wild within us. We are reclaiming, we are coming home to that wild warrior within us. And we are also listening to the fifth hundredth part of my story, because here's why I continue to insist and persist on this journey of explaining where I am now. One, I wasn't expecting it to be like literally the entire first season. I think I still might be able to like fit in some guests here and there, but that's actually not even one. I digress. One is, it's important. It's the foundation. This is literally why I had the podcast in the first place. And two, every single piece of my story has a really important lesson that I think all of us can learn from. This next part of my story is the part where we learn about vaginas, and not just vaginas, but really your entire pussy. And it's a doozy and it's powerful. And this part of my reclamation was literally the missing piece to really everything, but essentially and especially a huge piece of my business. So we are in 2021 and I removed my IUD, and I also removed my pants before I started recording this, because your girl's been in pants all day, and my top was cute. This is like a cute vibe, and I had like these khaki baggy, but truth is I wanted to be in the bathtub, but I felt the call to record and I was ready. So I'm like, I've got to just record while I look like this, even if my pants are off. So I have a cozy blanket on. Let's get into it. Now, let's have some backstory about my relationship with my womb. Because I didn't really have one. When I had and started my period, I didn't know anything. My sisters told me to use a tampon. I was like, what is this? It's on my underwear. It's bloody. They're like, this is your period. Here's a tampon. You just stick it in there. Literally, that was it. I never talked to anybody else about it. And I struggled really deeply with period pain, with awful period cramps. There were a couple times I threw up, many times. I don't know. It was bad. I always wanted to stay home from church when I had them, and I couldn't. And it was just not great. I just remember it being awful. And I never remember ever hearing about it being something that was exciting and empowering and, this rite of passage to womanhood. In fact, the only real advertising that I would see around wombs or periods was tampon commercials of people swimming and people doing tennis and running, literally climbing Everest. Tampons have made it possible for you to close it up, plug it up there, and continue on your way climbing to the top of the mountain, right? So I believe hustle culture has really been instilled in us in so many different ways. But one especially is not honoring our moon cycles, and our moon cycles, our period cycles, our menstruation, right? So I had no idea. I just knew that if I had a period, I wasn't getting pregnant, right? And that pretty much instilled the terror in me enough to not want to be super sexually active. This isn't about necessarily my sexually active journey, but let's move towards now when I'm married, had kids, was a labor nurse. Okay, actually go back, nursing school. Did I learn anything about my moon cycle? Absolutely not. And I will even go as far to say, educationally, it was very simple. Like I had an ovulation side, and then I had a menstruation side. As far as learning about the female anatomy in nursing school, never once was I taught about the clitoris. Okay. As a nurse, your girl, now remember, I was a labor and delivery nurse for 6 years. Your girl has seen hundreds of vaginas, hundreds, and she's also touched them. obviously with consent and obviously in a medical professional situation. Even then, I did not know what a clitoris was. Clitoris, however you want to skittle, whatever you want to call it. In fact, we're getting really TMI. I know I didn't have my first clitoral orgasm until I was 24 years old, 24, early 20s. And I had it by a bathtub jet. And I cried because it was so beautiful. I had no idea. I was always sensitive. In fact, as a child, I was humping things. I humped things for sure. I didn't realize, and I would touch and explore, but I thought that the touch and explore sensitivity was it. That was it. I thought that was it. I didn't realize that literally would feel like your whole body was folding in on itself and turning inside out and transcending to a literal different dimension, right? So that in and of itself was a very powerful reclamation, but it didn't really help me understand my body more. I still was very much conditioned to believe that one, my womb was only to give birth. And if I wasn't wanting to give birth, I believe in contraception. I believed heavily in contraception. Somehow though, I never put myself on pills. There were always these things that I just knew weren't good for me, even though I wasn't in this maybe holistic path. I always knew my angels just really had my back. Because of my history with mental health and also addiction, I'm so grateful, and also understanding oral contraception and how it just blasts you with hormones in the morning and then none at night, and then you're consistently going up and down. It's just so much on your nervous system. It's so much on your body. Also, not to mention artificial hormones. And let me just stop right here by saying, you guys know I am an advocate for anything that is needed in this particular time in your life. This is obviously just my experience, and with my education, as I've continued to educate myself, we're getting into that as I entered this new stage of womb, wisdom, priestess, understanding, education, certifications, etc., etc. There's just so much more knowledge. And as much as I honor everything that you want to do and every part of where you're at in your journey, I can't be quiet about this. I have to share it with you guys. This is why I've experienced what I have, right? Okay, so at that point, I just knew that pills weren't going to be the right thing for me. So I started first with the NuvaRing. Yeah. And it worked fine. It took me actually about 6 months to get pregnant with Reagan. So that made me nervous. But I kind of thought also that was normal. And then after each child, I had an IUD. It was just amazing, because obviously now I think you can get IUDs now if you haven't had a child. But I actually just saw a reel talking about how they don't give anesthesia for IUDs, which is so interesting now looking back, how traumatic that can be. I mean, even just understanding these little girls trying to understand their tissue, or not even understanding it at all, and being told that the only choice they have is putting a cotton foreign substance inside their yonis. Also, I'll make sure to put a disclaimer at the beginning of this that this is all about pussy, this particular podcast, and that I do say that word, and I think it's an empowering, powerful one. I won't say it a lot though. Anyway, so speaking of no anesthesia, I just want to talk about this too. After my second IUD, I had it in for 4 years. And remember, this was back in the time when I finally find hypnotherapy. I found yoga. I was ready to have another child. So I go to the doctor to get it removed, and he couldn't get it out. He had to get clamps. I passed out. It was so awful. It was embedded in my uterus. Absolutely no medicine, no medications. One of the most painful things I'd ever felt, literally just clamped and yanked. it out. And even after that, I got an IUD in, and I actually loved my IUDs. I had the Mirena IUD, and I freaking loved them. They served me so well. I had no period, which I loved, because at that point I was like, why would I want to bleed every month? Why would I want to do this? Why would I want to experience this? Right? Until as my spiritual journey and wellness journey has progressed, I began to realize my eyes have been opened to the power, the actual incredible power our wombs possess. So jump forward to 2021. I go to my midwife and she pulls out my IUD. It was really, really easy. It wasn't embedded or anything. And I began my journey of reclamation. Every single book you could think of, Womb Awakening, Red Power, Sophia Code, Mary Magdalene Revealed, oh my gosh, Wild Moon, Wild Power, literally every book you can think of, I could not stop reading and educating myself. Womb Awakening, did I already say that one? That one's an incredible one. So many courses, so many certifications, so much womb internal work from other priestesses who did this work to educate myself on how to do that. Yoni dermering, all these incredible things, which I can actually elaborate on those if we want to in a different podcast. But I became obsessed with understanding that my womb was the portal to literally everything that I had ever created. The portal of life, the portal of creation, like the essence of my children being birthed was only a fragment of what was being birthed from my womb, what the potential of being birthed from my womb was. And it was empowering, and it was the missing piece. So previously, in like 2019, I had a vision or an epiphany or a download that I knew I was going to create a new coaching certification program. And in that time, it was going to be body, mind, and soul, because that's what I was doing for my clients. That's what I was teaching, body, mind, and soul. We were working on fitness. We were working on our hypnotherapy, our minds, and essentially our souls, right? Our connections to our higher selves, our connections to God, our energy centers within us. It never clicked. It never clicked. It never came through until the womb piece came through. And of course, it wasn't complete until I had body, mind, soul, womb. And I started on this trajectory along the same time, actually a year before that in 2020. I had a couple friends ask me if I had ever heard about human design. And I was like, no. And they're like, you should do your chart and all these things. What are you? Blah, blah, blah. And so I had never been into any kind of personality type testing before. Like, of course, I was like, don't put me in the box. Don't put me in a box. Immediately when I saw human design, I promise this isn't a tangent. This does have something to do with it, I promise. But immediately when I found human design, it was very clear that it was something that very much called to me. It felt very clear that I was needing it in my life. And like, you already know, I go all in. So I started doing certifications and reading and really understanding. And I understood around that same time. It's no coincidence that human design came into my life. You know, like I said, 2020, it came in. It's kind of like the first time I heard about it. People say that human design, you start deconditioning from who you thought you were, the second you start learning about it. The second you start hearing about it for the first time. But I didn't really start really diving in until around 2021, when like I was able to settle my nervous system after the assault had happened, when Jeff and I were really good, better than ever before, like brand new marriage essentially. And I felt supported, and I was like, okay, I can do this. I can, continue my life as a forever student. One thing that I noticed, or that I learned, is that I'm a projector. And specifically, I'm a 4/6 ego projector, and ego projectors are actually even more rare than reflectors. Reflectors are like less than 1% of the population. And in my chart specifically, I only have 2 defined centers. Everything else is open with some hanging gates. And I'll give you guys like a whole rundown of what human design is podcast. I'd love to do that. But my identity center and my heart ego center are the only 2 that are defined. And so I have a lot of openness. And in the openness of human design, that's where you can be conditioned to think like others, to be like others, to believe what other people are saying versus like what's really true to you. And I realized that I was definitely not living like a projector. So I'll say this really quickly. Human design is essentially a physical roadmap for your physical body, a roadmap for your physical body in this life, right? And I'll explain more as how you get that roadmap in another podcast. But I didn't realize that it made so much sense once I saw it, because my addiction to uppers previously was so I could continue to hustle and move and focus and serve and perform. Well, no wonder I was addicted to that, because in my true natural essence, with no substances, I'm supposed to rest. I'm supposed to rest, especially as a projector with very few defined centers. I was burning myself out exponentially. So what happened is, what can happen is I went full pendulum, 5D. And when I went, and this is, you remember, plant medicine time too, I think I became so ungrounded because one, I was, really understanding the essence of these plant medicines. And then also I was like, oh, I'm supposed to rest. Oh my gosh, finally, this is my excuse to rest. Because remember my other pregnancies before Henry, I was like, oh, this is finally my chance. I get to eat whatever I want. I get to rest. I was hustle culture to the T still in 2021 until I really it was like permission. It was understanding that I was a projector was permission. But I took it to the extreme and I was like, oh, finally. I was like, well, I'm going to become vegetarian. Awful idea for me. I lost all my muscle and I also stopped lifting weights regularly. I was like, finally I had to rest. I'm just so damn tired. And coincidentally, I learned about cycle syncing. I learned about my moon. I learned about the power of my moon. I had researched and known enough to, when I removed my IUD, I was like, I will not put anything for the rest of my life inside my yoni. I'm going to figure out how to do that, which I talked about a little bit earlier, which is why I have wild moon underwear. But I went extreme. I finally could rest. And it's been now, it's 2023, and it's been 2 years of really understanding what that means and taking some severe, intense accountability and discipline too, because there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance, because even if you rest on your moon cycle or you rest because you're a projector, your physical body still needs assistance. It still needs work. It still needs to be cared for. You still need to oil it. It's a well-oiled machine, all these things. And it wasn't like I wasn't doing that. It was just that it took a little bit to get me to this new space, of, okay, so I need to rest. So compiling the resting that I understood as a projector and also the resting that I understood as a woman has been so empowering, and understanding that my follicular phase, which is the phase right after you finish your bleed, is when you get to really just not hustle, but be out there, show up, take action. it's been interesting being in the human design world because the human design world doesn't necessarily take into account monthly cycles, but combining them has been so powerful for me. Which is where the creation of Simply Sensual came in. It's a 4-week sensuality course. It talks all about this. And it's funny because interesting that I was always in this realm of womb and womanhood as a labor delivery nurse. And now even 10, 15 years later, or maybe even longer, maybe we're coming up on 20 years later, 15, I don't know. Whatever it is, I'm still in the realm of womanhood. And I feel like a baby. I'm just learning all these beautiful things and continuing to be a student to these priestesses who are teaching me all these beautiful things. So the beautiful thing about understanding the womb is that once you honor it, you begin to realize just how powerful you can be. Just how powerful you can be. And it just continues month after month after month. Let me just give you a little rundown of the vibe of a cycle, okay? We start on day 1, which is when you bleed. If you allow yourself to actually rest, and I literally mean rest. Back in the day, in ancient days, there were things called red tents. I'm sure, I don't know, maybe some of you haven't heard this before. But this is literally for women. Now, all the women were on the same cycle in these villages. And so they would all go into these tents together and bleed together and rest. And those are the women that weren't on cycles together. They would come and serve these women. And these women would literally do nothing. Now, when you are bleeding, you're literally removing, right? You're an open portal, moving things through you from either the previous month, or it could be that you're letting go of something from like the previous 3 months. That's known to happen as well. Energetically, how long has it been since you allowed yourself to rest enough to where you're not just removing the blood, but you're also releasing energetically, releasing what it is that no longer serves you? With that portal open, with the flow, with the leaving, you are so open to inspiration. The portal is open. Things aren't just going out, they're coming in. If you listen, are you listening? Are you allowing yourself to rest? You know, if it's not enticing enough for me to just beg you to rest on your moon so that it's less cramping, so you're bleeding less, so, you know, give you an excuse to rest, at least allow this piece of inspiration to be enticing for you, that you could literally get the most insane downloads if you just allowed yourself peace and stillness and just calmed the F down, right? So that's your moon bleed. And when I say moon bleed, I call it moon cycle because, guys, babes, we are cyclic beings and we go with the moon cycle. We flow with the moon cycle. Now, depending on when you ovulate and when you bleed, obviously some women bleed with the full moon. Some women ovulate with the new moon, and the waning and the weaning, whatever it is. That's really fun to see, like the energy behind that, but it also shifts a lot, especially if you're in eclipse season or if there's something that happened to you. But normally a normal cycle is around 28 to 30 days, right? So we're moon beings, and our moon cycle every single day has a different flavor. Every single day has a different feeling. Some days are more extreme than others as far as their shifts go, right? Sometimes the luteal phase is the longest. I'll get to that soon. But this is why women are different. This is why we feel all that we feel. Not just because we're so much more sensitive than men because of our portals and our wombs, but also because scientifically we have so many different hormones running through us, so many different hormones. So we bleed around 5 to 7 days, 3 to 7 days. My bleed's really only like 3 days. And I'll also note in this, this concept of free bleeding. This is backed by research. And this actually goes back to like my labor and delivery days. And this also, if you want to go deeper, you can totally go into Simply Sensual. It's not open yet. It's only open once a year. And it's like it's pre-recorded, but we have like a live Telegram group, and it's extremely empowering. We do breast massage and yoni de-armoring, and it's just so powerful. Anyway, your pelvis, your womb, your pelvic floor is made up of 4 muscle groups. And if you've seen a skeleton before, you know your pelvis is open, right? It's open. And if that muscle isn't worked or felt or moved or expressed or cared for, it doesn't just become flaccid, but it becomes the muscle becomes dead. The tissue becomes dead. It doesn't even, and there's also energetics behind all that we store in our hips. Everything becomes tight. And I wish I had a diagram right here. You'll have to see it in Simply Sensual, but every muscle is connected through our pelvis. So if you have a tight back, guaranteed it's because you have a tight pelvis, tight hips, tight legs, tight calves, tight abdomen. Maybe you're not able to exhale enough. Maybe your shoulders slouch. Maybe you feel like your chest isn't open. It's all connected to the womb. So much so, including our throat chakra. In fact, our esophagus, the opening, our larynx in our mouth, literally match and look exactly like our cervix. And if our cervix and our womb is open, and if our throat is open, they are in sync. If one is open, the other is open. If one is closed, the other is closed, which is why chakra work is so essential, which is another reason why I created my Ascension chakra class. Now I'm going to pause here because there's this thing that happens in spiritual culture that I am not against, but I think turn off a lot of women, where it's, how do I say this? I guess I'll just say it like almost over sexualizes sexuality, almost over sexualizes like the dripping wetness of our wombs, the dripping wetness of our pussies, to the point that it's very, it's just not approachable. And it's difficult because we come from a culture that says it's gross, that says and I don't know where this came from. Probably a guy, not necessarily a feminist guys, but it's just is what it is. Okay. I can understand that I want my partner in divine union, and also understand that society was based off of patriarchy for a while. Those two things can coexist. So with that being said, unfortunately, we have been taught as a society, as women, that we need tight, wet pussies. Well, first of all, those two do not go hand in hand, because if it's going to be wet and there's going to be fluid and moisture going down there, there's also going to be blood flow. And the blood flow is what opens up your flower and opens up your vulva and opens up those beautiful labia majora and minora. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But guess what? Just like anything, we get to reprogram ourselves, decondition ourselves, and believe in our truth. Regardless of what anybody says, regardless of what society says, regardless of whether you want a tight yoni or not, scientifically, physiologically, anatomically, if we could just relax our tissue, feel our tissue, work our tissue, touch our tissue, everything within our body would be healthier. Straight up. Sometimes that doesn't begin by yoni dermering. Sometimes that doesn't begin by yoni cupping. Sometimes it doesn't begin with masturbation or self-pleasure or understanding all those different feelings. Sometimes that's too much. If that feels like too much, it's like, what comes first, the cart or the horse, or the chicken or the egg? Whatever that is, whatever that saying is, I would suggest cycle syncing first. That was a tangent of essentially what I was trying to say is if you want to have incredible womb health, yoni health, connection to your feminine power, understanding the tissue and the anatomy is one, right? And two, it's if you do have a womb, physically, because you'll always have a womb, whether you don't or you do physically, you'll always have an energetic womb, an energetic space, the sacral chakra. You can do all of the work that you want, but if you are not allowing yourself to rest during your menstruation, it is going to cause so much pain throughout the other times of the month. It just is. Our bodies were not meant to go every single day for 30 days straight, and then another 30 days, and then another 30 days. Not even the moon stays full all month, you guys. We are meant to wane and wean and literally be gone as the new moon, right? Like she checks out. She's like, "This, I'm not even going to be here. I'm taking a night off." Even the world and the Mother Earth goes through seasons and changes. What a gift that we can finally exhale and begin to honor our moon cycles. So, where do I go from here? Okay. Tissue. I hope this is all making sense. I'm filming again during the eclipse and I just felt so called to film, and we're just going to honor it. We're going to honor it. So with our womb, our moon bleeds, with our bleed and our yoni, our vagina is a muscle. Okay, so we know how important it is for it to be touched and felt and healed and moved and worked, and that there's 4 muscles and that, all those things. This muscle is connected to the muscle of your uterus. Your uterus is a muscle. And if you've had children or if you haven't, that's how the child is removed, is through contractions, which is essentially just a contraction, a tightening of the muscle. This tightening happens also during your moon bleeds. In order for the uterine wall to be sloughed of that layer, if it is not pregnant, it contracts. And guess what else contracts with it? Your vagina. All the muscles, they're all connected, of course. If one's contracting, the other one's going to as well. They're all contracting. But what happens if there's something inside of the vagina to stop it from contracting? What happens? 2 things. 1, it's probably going to work a lot harder. And 2, it might develop more sloughing. It might be confused. It might be like, wait, I'm not computing what's going on here. Something foreign's inside of me. Wait, do I have to overcompensate here? So a lot of what we thought was something else that was causing this cramping could be your tampon. And we know this. There's like toxic shock syndrome. There's warnings all over the boxes. But we continue to put things in our yoni because we've been taught as a society that we have to always go on our bleeds, that we can't rest, and that our bleeds are gross. Because the only other products really up until maybe a handful of years ago were pads, and they felt gross and they leaked and they felt like diapers and they were wet and sticky. So without even understanding really why I wanted to free bleed this. So this concept of, I started free bleeding without understanding the concept. As far as understanding the concept of how it's going to work, or if it's even going to be comfortable, or if it's going to smell, like all of those concerns. I had the knowledge enough as I was learning about my womb cycle and connecting the dots of, wow, there's 2 different things at play here. The physiological reasoning as to why cramping or heavy bleeds happen when you use tampons, and the energetics of hating your moon cycle so badly, you don't think your womb feels that? Absolutely it does. Your womb is its own magical portal, almost its own entity, its own incredible energy space. And if there is a disconnect, if you're letting your mind win over your womb, it's going to feel it. It's not going to feel supportive. It's not going to feel happy. This is the same as the energetics of anything, about manifestation, about abundance. The feelings that you feel around something, if they are negative, are going to continue. And that's something that you're trying so badly to manically manifest isn't going to manifest in your life at all because you're just being so negative about it, right? I say that with a caveat, however, because sometimes we don't know any other way. Like there's just so much ignorance around this topic that I also believe the intention, remember the intention piece, the intention will always go so far, your intention. So that's where the concept of free bleeding comes in. And so I tried a bunch of period underwear and I hated them. I have this severe, I don't actually know what it is. And I don't mean to say this in like an insensitive way. So if I do say this and it's insensitive, I don't mean it. Whether it is like a slight autism or part of my ADHD or my OCD, I really struggle with clothing on my skin, particularly the way that it lays. So my undergarments, underwear, whatever you want to call them, if they don't fit me correctly, I notice it really affects my body dysmorphia. Like if I feel digging in my stomach, it's a no-go. Like if I feel any restriction, it's a no-go. And so as I've like understood this and seen it for what it is, it's just what it is. Like I try to be really fun with my outfits and try to be fun with fashion, but I've had to be really mindful about what the clothing and the fabrics feel like. And it's not a bad thing. It's just I'm just sensitive. My sense for human design is feeling the vibe. And I think that maybe has to do with it just because I'm so sensitive. I say all of that because this actually benefited not just me, but all of us that have found Wild Moon underwear, because I was so particular. I'm like, if I'm going to wear this, if I'm going to go on this journey and honor this, I am not wearing uncomfortable underwear. I will not do it. I do not wear underwear unless I'm in my moon. I freeball it because it's just, there's so many layers and the tucking and all the things. I just can't do it. So when I sat out to design this Wild Moon underwear, I was like, it has to feel so perfect. And I feel like I've totally done that while also having PFA free and organic. It's just been, and it's bamboo. Some of it's bamboo, some of it's poly, but it's all PFA free. So what a gift. So that journey of really reclaiming what my period was to me has been so rad and so powerful, and has just, I absolutely believe that there is no doubt in my mind that me settling into my feminine, really settling into my feminine and really settling into this concept of ebbing and flowing has absolutely helped me have my most successful business years. 1000%. Because I've worked less and tripled, I don't even know, my income. I have to go look again, but absolutely this year specifically has been my highest year. And I just continued seeing it, not necessarily exponentially rise, because I do believe that with that could potentially come either more employees or work. And I'm not sure if I want that. Like the definition of wealth to me is very different than, oh, I'm going to make 10 million a year. Now I don't necessarily need that. What I do desire is a powerful, sustainable, beautiful income that also allows me the freedom of what wealth means to me, which is a slow morning, sauna and cold plunging, resting on my moon. So I have a handful of employees now, but it's just like the perfect piece right now. So going back to the cycle, should we wrap that part up? We should wrap that part up. So I'm bleeding, we're free bleeding, we're trying free bleeding, we're seeing how it feels in our bodies, right? And After we rest, this beautiful thing called follicular phase happens. Oh, it's the best. And you start to notice that you can take action. But guess what happens? All of a sudden, you have all these new ideas. All of these codes have dropped in, all these downloads. You understand exactly what it is that you want to accomplish. You know how you want to launch something. You know how you want to have that conversation you've been avoiding. And this is the time to do it. This is the time when we lift weights, when we do HIIT workouts, when we do extensive cardio. This is when we really act and show up. I actually am planning on doing, if you're watching or listening to this in the future, I'm planning on doing this really powerful cycle syncing for business women soon. So if it's not out, just be on the lookout for that. If not in 2023, for sure at the beginning of 2024. Anyway, so that's the follicular phase. And then the ovulation is only like, depending, 2 to 4 days. And it is spicy and it is exciting. That's when our egg is dropping. And that's when it's like, come to me. We become horny. We become ready. We become open. And maybe none of that is happening right now because maybe you don't even understand or feel these differences in your cycle because you've never allowed yourself to honor the differences. Anytime I'm helping a client really understand or try out the power of cycle syncing, I always say, give it 3 months. Give free bleeding 3 months. Give cycle syncing 3 months. Just give it a chance because it just takes a second. Not only to just, I almost just feel like it takes us a second to just detox from this, from the world of hustle culture, but also just the energy behind it. And what is it that we're harboring or holding into our bodies? Like when we're in hustle culture, we're so tight, our nervous systems are so drawn out that it takes almost like those 3 months to just relax, right? So then after we ovulate, we enter our luteal. And in our luteal phase, we begin to slow down. Our progesterone begins to rise. And during this time when our progesterone rises, that's usually when we see severe mood swings. Some people can develop PMDD here. And usually what I've noticed in my research and through my clients is that it's worse if you aren't honoring your cycle. Because by this time, your body is tired. Also, what happens here is our wombs are beginning to open. Our portals are beginning to like potentially open, right? Like the veil begins to thin. And we begin to just become more intuitive. We begin to notice things more. So on top of this physiological progesterone hormone situation, energetically and spiritually, this is also happening hand in hand. And what we see happen is that we become more irritable with everybody because everything's just more sensitive. I've literally noticed that I can tell if people are lying, especially, I can tell usually all the time, but especially during this time, I can feel like, oh, like I can't be around you. Why are you being dishonest? Not even that they're trying to lie. It's like, why aren't you being true to yourself? Oh my gosh, like the energy just becomes really intense. That's why PMS is actually stands for please make space, because you just want to like walk away slowly and give yourself space to prepare for your moon bleed. This is a perfect time. Your luteal is a perfect time to do your yoga, do your walking, set your schedule up so that those 3 days that you're bleeding, you don't do anything. Maybe you have a grocery delivery. Maybe you have a pact with your friend and you're like, listen, when I'm doing my moon bleed, I take your kids. When you're on your moon bleed, you take my kids. How freaking cool would that have been? My kids are now 13, 10, and 6 currently. So this is my very first year, which is actually why I was able to start the podcast. I didn't even say this at the beginning of the podcast. This is a big deal. The reason why I finally feel like I have time And the reason why I'm finally starting the podcast is because my kids are in school. So I have time, and which is really fun. Anyway, but for the majority of my mothering adult life, now I'm 35, I didn't have somebody to like help me. I just would stick a tampon in and run around with cramping and be hormonal and mean and sad. And that would just continue. That habit would continue month after month after month. And I didn't even go into the difference of what you can eat for your cycles, cycle seeding, eating different seeds, or even like the intensity of like the exercise. So if you guys are curious about that, I actually envision the podcast being some guests, but also if there's a question, like a lot of Q&A. I do a Q&A. This is not a tangent, I promise. This has something to do with it, but I do a Q&A every week on Instagram, and that's where I channel. People answer questions, and I can't help but give like the lengthiest answers because that's where I work best. Projectors are best one-on-one. We are the guides. We are not about ourselves. Like, my life isn't about me. My life is about you. Like, I see me through you. I go through things so that I can help the collective, all those things. So I love getting questions and then sitting and giving them like just the most beautiful, full channeled answers, literally just opening my crown and channeling them from my angels and guides. So I do believe that we'll go into more of this womb conversation later in another podcast, but me reclaiming my womb initially had nothing to do with my sexuality. And I'm going to give another caveat, and I'm going to do another judgment on this new age spirituality, because I think that there is sort of a theme that can happen where you open spiritually, you notice that, oh my gosh, I am whole. I am sovereign. I don't need anybody. My womb is open. I'm manifesting with each orgasm, all these things. And sometimes it can be like, oh, then I'm open sexually. Oh, well, I don't believe in monogamy. Oh, well, I believe in energy, and I believe in all these different things. And that means that I'm so sexual. And now that I'm on spiritual awakening, I've had my Kundalini awakening and I have all this sexual energy. Doesn't have to mean that. And if it does, and if it works for you and you're communicating that with your partner, girl, I am for that for you. I support you. However, if you've been resisting connecting with your womb or free bleeding or understanding even just your sexuality because you're worried it means that you have to be this dripping, open, sexual goddess who posts naked pictures of her on Instagram, it doesn't have to be that. It can be your own journey. That's why Simply Wild is here. Remember, we celebrate the naked pictures while also celebrating that may be not for us. We celebrate the people who are wanting to explore sexually while also understanding that loose sexual energy is probably not what we want to do. We honor every frequency. The most important part that I would suggest, and why I'm spending so much time on this topic, and why I think every woman needs to either take Simply Sensual, my course, or start touching yourself, something, cycle sync, whatever, start to begin to get to know your womb, is because there is a reason why our wombs have been demonized. There is a reason why people like to say our periods are awful. There is a reason why they like to say, don't be so sexual. There's a reason why you have a feeling. There's a reason why you're triggered by that naked woman. There's a reason why you don't want to show your skin. Okay? And that reason is because our wombs are actual portals to creation. Our wombs are portals to abundance. Our wombs are portals to our medicine. Our wombs are portals to our unique frequencies. They are everything. And if we can, for one goddamn second, slow down and listen and honor, your moon blood is the most nutrient, powerful liquid besides water on this earth. Do you even allow yourself to touch it, to look at it? What would happen if you just started to slow down? It changed everything for me. It opened up so much new teaching around the masculine within me and the feminine within me, around what I'm capable of, around this idea that I thought you had to hustle. I thought you had to work so hard to make money. You don't. In fact, the more you rest, the more you honor a couple hours of focus a couple times a week, and then allow yourself to be in pleasure, just imagine what could happen. It isn't necessarily about your sexual active life. It's about your senses. Literally why we're here, why we are encapsulated in this cosmic meat suit, living this insanely powerful human experience with every array of emotion possible, so that we can experience literally whatever it is that we want to experience, and experience literally everything. The good and the bad and the ugly and the beautiful and the light and the hard and the stillness and the movement. But if we're demonizing one thing and glorifying another, we can never get the balance there. We can never get the balance there. So that's my challenge to you. That's my little rant about moon bleeds and how it's become so transformative to me. In fact, Jeff's an emotional manifester in human design, so he does his things on his own time. So it literally was just like 3 months ago that he finally added my cycle app on his phone, which was fine. I never pressured him at all. I did suggest it a couple times because I think when you become so aware of your cycle, I'm very, very, very aware. So right now, currently, I am in my progesterone's really high, and it's the full moon eclipse tomorrow, the last eclipse of the year, ending a 2-year long karmic cycle. I'm just heightened, very heightened. And he can go look at my cycle and see why that is and not take things so personally. So having your spouse on board, and then also the power that's given me to change things for my kids, to explain things to my daughter. My daughter packs around a pair of period underwear at school every day, just in case she starts. She hasn't started yet. She's 13. I plan on doing a whole period party for her when she has her period. And we've already had numerous conversations about her anatomical body. And I very clearly have also explained to her that her clitoris is for pleasure. It has 8,000 nerve endings. 8,000 nerve endings. That is twice, 3 times, 10 times as much as the male penis. And it's outside of our bodies. It's not even used for conception. Literally for your own pleasure. So, as you navigate this life and as you navigate your own self and as you come back to the wild within you, I'm sure I'll have some kind of incredible guest speakers on here that talk about this more. But I had to go on my rampage and give a little bit of my testimony around womb wisdom and magic because, well, 1, I have a whole company surrounding it, the Wild Mood Underwear. But 2 is a huge piece of my story. It's a huge piece of my awakening. A huge piece. I've always been a sexual being. Always been really touchy, always been very personal, but Understanding my womb really gave me the power back for myself, and and helped me understand really my own sovereign sexuality, my own sovereign womb power. And having those conversations with Jeff are so powerful. Just surrounding, my own self-pleasure practices and honoring them and honoring what that was and what I did. And I'll have to come back and talk about different rituals that I do around that and the yoni wands that I use and all those things. It's been an incredible journey, but it's a huge piece, because softening and settling into the feminine goes hand in hand with honoring your cycle. And all it takes is the hardest thing in the world, which is surrender. And it's also the hardest thing in the world to choose yourself. So if you're brave enough to go on the journey of just giving yourself 3 months, just imagine what it'll change for you. So where are we on my journey? I think we're present day. Maybe the next podcast will be Jeff coming on here. And then maybe wrapping up a little bit of my plant medicine experiences. I plan to continue to talk about my plant medicine experiences kind of throughout the podcast. I haven't really felt into or gotten the inspiration. It hasn't dropped yet as far as, I have a lot of ceremonies and I have a lot of things I want to share with you. I just don't know yet which ones go where and where we go from here. So I guess we'll see. What comes up next in the Simply Wild podcast. And I hope that you do something today to help you remember the wild within you. I love you so much. See ya.